When treatments for urinary urgency or leakage focus solely on the bladder, they often fail to address the actual mechanism of control. In traditional Chinese medicine, the bladder is seen as a passive storage facility. It holds fluid, but it doesn't decide when that fluid is released. This two-part system clarifies the relationship. Node 1 is the bladder, responsible for storage. Node 2 is the kidney system, the gate controller. As the bladder fills, kidney qi dictates retention versus release, actively keeping the gate shut. This means targeting the bladder with generic supplements will likely be ineffective if the underlying gate mechanism is the part that is actually malfunctioning. Solving the issue requires identifying why the gate is failing. You need to know if the mechanism is physically weak or if it is being forced open by an external factor. You can find your starting point by asking one question: can you hold your urine if you actively try? If you can consciously delay urination even with a full bladder, it suggests your functional kidney qi system is still intact. However, a total inability to hold even small volumes of fluid indicates a systemic failure of your body's containment. This distinction filters out severe systemic deficiency, helping to separate a mild behavioral imbalance from a deep pathology that requires a specific intervention. We can map these failures into 4 specific patterns. The first is a failure of containment, called kidney qi deficiency. This profile is marked by frequent urination, dribbling after the fact, and a general sense of weak control over the urge. Treating this requires long-term tonification. Because you are addressing a systemic weakness, there are no rapid fixes. It requires consistent effort over time. There is also a deeper, colder variation of this profile, kidney yang deficiency. Here, the urine is clear and profuse. You'll likely experience cold limbs and find yourself waking up in the early morning, specifically to use the bathroom. This pattern requires warming protocols, like moxibustion, and a complete restriction of raw or cold foods to help rebuild that internal fire. Both weak gate profiles require a slow, methodical rebuilding of energy. Over-the-counter pills designed for temporary relief will not resolve a deep-seated structural deficiency. Beyond these deficiency profiles lies the excess pattern. This is a scenario where the system isn't lacking strength, but is instead under pressure from a pathogen. This is damp heat. Internal inflammation acts as a pathogenic force that irritates the bladder and forces the gate open prematurely. This presents as a sudden, aggressive urgency. The urine is often dark, and you may experience a burning sensation or physical pain during urination. The trade-off for recovery is strict. It requires cooling interventions and the total removal of alcohol, spicy foods, and greasy meals while the condition is acute. Misdiagnosis here is particularly problematic. Taking warming kidney supplements for a damp heat pattern will feed the inflammation and significantly worsen the urgency. The final pattern, spleen qi sinking, can mimic kidney weakness, but actually starts in your digestive center. Think of your central energy as a lifting mechanism. When this spleen qi fails, it loses the ability to hold internal structures and fluids up, leading to a downward leakage. This pattern is unique because the leakage is often triggered by physical fatigue or lifting heavy objects. It's frequently accompanied by loose stools and general exhaustion. Fixing this requires lifting that central energy through digestive repair and mandatory rest, making it a very lifestyle-dependent fix. If exhaustion is what triggers the leak, the solution is to support your core energy, rather than focusing solely on the urinary gate. We can organize these archetypes into a final self-assessment protocol. It begins by assessing the nature of the urge itself. First, determine if your issue is a weak failure to hold or a sudden forced expulsion of urine. Next, look at the fluid. Clear and profuse output points one way, dark and burning output points the other. Finally, check your cofactors. Deep fatigue and cold limbs will help you land on your specific TCM archetype. For those with damp heat, the path is cooling and removal. Avoid warming herbs entirely. For spleen qi sinking, you must prioritize digestive repair and rest before you attempt to address the bladder directly. For kidney deficiency, whether qi or yang, focus on slow, steady containment. These are permanent structural changes, not overnight fixes. Using these parameters to find your archetype ensures you stop wasting time on generic solutions and start treating the actual systemic cause of your symptoms.